Today I'm talking about that dirty 7-letter D word, divorce. And only those of you who have gone through the excruciating pain of divorce understand it. Lucky me, I've been through it twice. 2 very different marriages and 2 very different divorces. So if you've been through a divorce or if you're going through a divorce, stick around to hear about my experiences and my 7 tips to recover from divorce and reinvent yourself post-divorce. It is doable. You can be fabulous again, I promise. I'm not an expert, but I'm going to tell you, I've counseled so many friends about divorce. I get all the phone calls, I suppose, because I guess I'm somewhat of an expert. And whether you're a man, a woman, old or young, whether it's your choice or not, divorce totally sucks. Even the word is like something forbidden. It's a huge faux pas. No one wants to talk about it. No one wants it to happen to them. No one wants to catch it. Divorce, it's like a death. And I've said this before, maybe it's worse in some cases, because when someone dies, they're not personally choosing to leave you. But in a divorce, someone is leaving someone. And that can feel more devastating than death. And you don't always get that outpouring of support that you do when someone actually dies. So I was actually watching this great show on Apple TV. You guys should watch it. It's called Shrinking. The main character, it's a widower, and he was talking to a woman he just met, but they were having a ton of chemistry, and she was divorced, and I guess it came up that he was a widower. And so, just out of the blue, she asked him, she goes, okay, I know this might be weird, but do you ever think your wife dying might be better than what happened to me? And by the way, her husband had left her for her best friend. So that's pretty bad. And he quickly responded, he said, no, I don't think it's worse. And she said, wait a second, hear me out. Any good memory that she had of her ex-husband is now tainted. It's gone. But then she said, I bet you have a million memories of your wife, beautiful memories, and you get to keep them all. And there is some validity to that because a divorce does taint everything. And as sad and devastating as a loss and as a death is, that's the one thing we always tell people after a death, hang on to those memories. You have those beautiful memories. Anyway, here's my story. As I mentioned, I've had 2 divorces, one when I was 30 and my kids were super young, and the second was when I was 42. So let's talk about divorce number 1. So my first husband, he was my real first boyfriend. He is the father of both my children. I met him when I was 18. We were married when I was 25, and I had my first child at 26. She was unplanned, not unwanted, unplanned for sure. But I knew very early on that we were not well suited to each other. In fact, I probably knew even before we got married. Our differences, they were very apparent to everyone. And it was painful to be in the relationship. I remember people telling me that it was kind of painful to be around us because we weren't fun to be around. We didn't mesh. It was always, I felt like I was going against the grain and on repeat, always going against the grain. And for me personally, and I'm not saying anyone who does this is wrong, but I'm not one to stay together for the kids. I'm also a child of divorce. I had 2 very ill-suited parents stay together, apparently for the sake of the children in a loveless marriage. And they did that until I was 18. And that impacted very much my decision to leave my first marriage. And my kids were young. They were 5 and 2.5. But to me, the way I looked at it is I didn't want my kids to live with this tumultuous relationship. And that would be the framework for which they saw relationships. After we divorced and I made the decision to leave, I know the lawyers, they labeled it a high conflict divorce. And that really was an understatement. Like anything that could be hard was hard. I remember there were days I'd wake up and I'd pray, like, please, this is just some kind of dream. It didn't seem that it was real because it was just so many things coming at me. And I would have that sick feeling in my stomach. And it was all I had to do every day to just keep going.
When you were going through that and it was so bad, did you ever question if you should go through with ending the marriage?
No. As awful as it was, I always knew I needed to leave. I needed to leave that marriage. I needed to leave for me. I needed to leave for my children. And it certainly couldn't have been good for him because it wasn't a good relationship. But I always felt that I was in survival mode after that. Like every day was a battle. I worried about everything, and I worried that I was facing everything alone. And then, all of a sudden there were things that I had to do that I didn't usually have to do. Like I had to go out and find another place. First I lived with my mom. I moved in with my mom. Then I ended up renting a place. And then things like, I had cutting the lawn, taking out the garbage, shoveling the driveway. Like that was stuff I didn't used to do that now I had to do.
Is that it?
Well, kind of, because I was used to doing everything else. Those were the kind of male oriented things that I wasn't used to doing. And, interesting as I reflect back on, and I'll get into like the impact to the kids and stuff, but my oldest daughter is now a family lawyer, and she says she wanted to specialize in family law to heal her inner wound of divorce. So that says a lot about how bad things were, her being 5 when we divorced. And as horrific as it was for me to manage the divorce, balance everything that needed to be balanced, there was work, there was kids, there was the kids' activities, there was the divorce proceedings, the legal part, there was the fallout of the extended family, of your joint friends, of money, not having money. And as hard as all that was for me, it is always, always worse for the kids. This is really the breakdown of their fairy tale family. And then all of a sudden they go from this home with their mom and their dad, and now they're back and forth. And they see and they know and they feel that their parents are in distress. My kids were young, but they knew it was a horrible time. The most important person to protect in a divorce is always the child or the children. And I would tell my friends this when they would call me, and I would say, remember that you chose each other, before the kids, and your kids are half of each parent. And, the kids, they don't understand divorce, why it happens. They always want the parents to stay together. They want the family to stay intact. It's an innate desire. It's their security. It's their identity. And the kids want and they need security. I guess we all do, but especially for kids. And here's a news flash. And I say it to anyone who would call me saying that they were going through divorce. Don't smack talk the other parent. Ever. If you shame the parent, you shame the child. And that, my friends, is parental alienation. And that is the devil. This is why I say to everyone and anyone who calls me and when they're going through divorce with kids, don't do that. Do not speak ill of the other parent to the children. I have no time for it. There's no excuse for it. I've been on the receiving end of it. And I know how damaging it is to the parent, but more importantly, the innocent child or the children. And they can't properly process that intel anyway. And here's the other thing. It's long-term damage to the kids, always. It's long-term damage to that parent who is talking ill of the other parent. Because eventually, when the kids grow up and they can assess things differently, they will never appreciate you speaking ill of their other parent. And that is just damaging all around. Ask my daughter, the divorce lawyer. Both my kids were impacted, obviously, but the fact that my one daughter wanted to be a family lawyer because of how much trauma she went through during the divorce, that's very telling. And you know what? You can talk to your friends. You don't have to tell your children. These are the things these are discussions you have with other adults. It's so difficult to protect the child when one parent is not being reasonable, too. They're blinded with their hurt or their hate or their vengeance. This is the other person who was left, usually. And you can't protect the child from what someone else is doing. But what you can do is you can do the best you can do. You can control yourself. And let's face it, you know better. Go to therapy. Listen to your therapist. I went to therapy and I listened to my therapist. I tried to get to my kids in therapy. There were a lot of roadblocks with that, and I won't get into those specifics, but it is imperative that you have some type of professional third-party advice for you and for your kids to help deal with everything that's going on. So this was a really dark time for me. The one thing I will say is I was lucky because I had good friends. And especially my one friend, my business partner, Norma. And I had other friends too who really helped and supported me and listened to me and all my nonsense. My mom helped me a lot. She took care of my kids a lot, especially when I was traveling when they were young. And, looking back, it was a long time ago. Looking back, I can see a lot of things that I did wrong and a lot of things that I could have done better. And I can't change that. I did my best. I think I did the best I knew how to do then. But what I know I did is I know I let my stress consume me. And that is never good. It's not a good way to deal with things. I know sometimes it's a natural way. The stress is overwhelming. But one of my biggest problems was just believing that I was going to get through it. Like I was in survival mode, but I wasn't believing, you know what? And people would tell me this, you are going to get through it. Things are going to get better. But when you're in that dark spot, you honestly don't know. You don't believe that it will be better, or I didn't. I was ruminating on all the bad stuff, and I'll talk later a bit about how bad that is and counterproductive it is. It doesn't help. And also, you have to manage how much you ruminate or how much you think about all of this bad stuff or sad stuff. I remember my therapist, Patty, and she was amazing. And she'd say to me, you can be sad for an hour a day, but then you got to move on. You have to, get dressed up, go to work, and just compartmentalize that, because to sit and wallow, it's just certain. First of all, you shouldn't allow yourself to do that. And second of all, it does no good for anyone. So that was divorce number one. Let's fast forward to my second divorce. So that divorce was a blended family situation gone wrong. I remarried when I was 38. He had 3 boys, and I had 2 girls. They were all, teens or preteens. It was basically a Brady Bunch dream that did not come to fruition. And there were many issues in that relationship. But to me, my opinion, the biggest one was the inability for us to align and integrate as parents. So we were never a united front. We were forever divided when it came to certain things, and mostly as it related to the kids. So think about this for a minute. Even in marriages where, your first marriage, where you both have kids together and they're both your children, typically there's different styles of parenting and of discipline. So now when you're in a blended family situation, of course, there's going to be even more differences, and they're not all your biological children. So in a regular marriage, on average, divorce can happen about 50% of the time. That increases to 75% for second marriages that blend a family. And those are terrible odds. But at the time, it didn't scare me. I had my sociology degree and I read all the books. But ultimately, if the parents are not aligned, the family will fail. No ifs, ands, or buts. Also, with a second marriage, there's so many additional extraneous variables. There's the exes. There's the ex-in-laws. There's holiday schedules. There's a fact, a big one. Your kids do not want you to be with someone else. They still have that fairy tale. They don't understand. They're not adults. They don't want their mom and their dad not to be with their mom and their dad. So, they can, without even knowing it, try to sabotage the relationship. It's just because they want their mother and father and that family unit to be intact. There's other practical things like cars and houses and vacations. Like usually you blend a family and you have these other children. And even though the schedules are different, you need more bedrooms, usually. Vacations, you're going with many more people. There's cars. How do you transport everyone? I'm talking a lot about my second marriage because there were 5 kids and 2 adults. So there were 7 people. And then of course there's the division of money, which is hard enough in your first marriage, but the second marriage, it just becomes more convoluted. And I know for me, I definitely didn't get married with the intent, didn't get married a second time with the intent to get divorced again. And when things started to go south and when I saw the inevitable writing on the wall, I was devastated. I felt totally defeated. And that divorce, that was not my decision. And even when I knew that the marriage, I didn't think it would ever work. The union was impossible to fix. I still, in a weird way, I felt blindsided when it finally, the guillotine came down and it was over. And I handled it really badly. I lost my composure. I became an absolute shell of myself, and all my friends would tell me that. I lost myself into, the depth of despair, depression, drinking. I drank way too much. I was a terrible version of myself, and I knew it. Like, I didn't even like to look at myself. I didn't even look like myself. I was scared about how I could survive financially. It felt like deja vu again. How was I going to survive? Both my kids were going off to university. How could I buy a home? At the time in my business, I was self-employed and business was, up and down, wasn't secure. So I was right back. As I mentioned, I was right back in survival mode again. Again, I think in my head, I wasn't sure I'd recover. I wasn't sure it would be okay. And that was my mindset. And I was negative. I was harsh. I was unhappy. And as negative as I was, the more negative shit, the more terrible stuff would happen to me. I had 2 huge floods in my house, one almost right after the other. I had this contractor and he was totally taking advantage of me. He was trying to commit insurance fraud. He wanted to try to sue me and put a lien on my home. I was going through the legal process, not just of my second divorce. I was also involved with trying to clean something up with my first divorce to ensure that, I would have, my kids would have money for university. I became a hermit, and I'm pretty outgoing. I'm more of an extrovert if I have to talk about my personality, but I became a hermit. I didn't want to go out. I didn't want to see anyone. I didn't want anyone to see me. I think I was ashamed. I was embarrassed. My friends and my kids, they didn't recognize me. I was a pathetic mess. I really was. I was having a terrible time with my oldest daughter for a number of reasons. I think one is that she was just so disappointed in the way that I was handling myself. And also I think there was a lot of information she was receiving that she shouldn't have, and that was inappropriate. Parental alienation was at the center of it. And it's very convoluted, and I won't get into it more for that. It took years for me to recover. And for me, just to get back to me, it was an uphill battle. And I think it was so difficult because for the most part, I was fighting myself. And then this was another beauty. I started dating, and I started dating way too soon. And when you date too soon, you aren't ready. But not only are you not ready because you're not recovered, you're not well adjusted, but you're attracting, they say like attracts like. You're attracting you. And that's exactly what I did. My first relationship post-divorce was with, he was a liar. I joke. I say he had his master's in manipulation and his PhD in lying and cheating. I think I was easy prey. I was an easy target. And it didn't last long, but it proved to me that I was not ready to date. And I needed to get my shit together before I went out and had any business dating. So now that you've heard about my double-header divorce sob story, let me share with you some suggestions I have on how to recover, because I want you to learn from all my mistakes. And just like when all my friends would call me, I'd want to tell them, look, I went through this and I did this. And half the time what I did was what I wouldn't suggest they do. So I have all of these mistakes that you can learn from. And remember, I'm not a professional. I'm sharing my advice from my vantage point after my 2 divorces, and throw in there my BA in sociology. So here are 7 tips to get through divorce and reinvent yourself. Number 1, and this should be obvious to everyone, make sure your kids are the main focus. Your kids are what matters. They're affected at any age, regardless if it's a first or second divorce. And although the one that involves their parent is more impactful, they need you to be the best version of yourself. And as I mentioned, I was not, especially the second time around. Number 2, never shame the parent. If you shame the parent, you shame the child. So I know I'm repeating this, but I learned this in my first year university. And I clearly remember thinking when I heard it, I was like, wow, I wish my parents had learned from that or had heard that statement and they had, not spoken ill of the other parent. Parental alienation, it's a thing. And it's, like I said before, it's devastating for all partners. It never helps anything, ever. And mostly, it will devastate your kids. And the person doing the alienation, they might think they're winning short term. They will not win long term. And the kids lose the most. And to me, it's incredible that people don't understand this. And, when I talk to my friends and when they call me when they're going through divorce and they'd say, well, I don't really, it's like, just don't talk ill in front of your kids. We all have slip ups. We all lose composure, but just make this a rule. And also try to get along with your ex if you can, and definitely be cordial in front of your children. Don't fight over trivial shit. And I think, one of the things that my daughter, as the family lawyer, would say is that a lot of times that's what people are fighting over. We always say when we're in arguments with our spouse and things like that, it's never about the dishes in the sink. It's about something else. And, you get into a divorce battle and you're fighting over things that are so unimportant because one person feels abandoned or blindsided or whatever. So just try to get along. Number 3, and I've mentioned this, go to therapy. Get your kids in therapy. Find a way. You need professional advice, and so do your kids. Your friends are great, and you can have lots of conversations with them, and they can try to reassure you and make you feel better. But a therapist is an independent, objective third party, and you need that. And also, you need to express yourself. I saw this video. I won't show it because it's a long clip, but it was this psychologist that I respect, and I can't remember his name right now, but he had said something to the effect of, you can be 4 times more likely to die if you don't express yourself. And this was actually the study they had done was about women who didn't express themselves and they were unhappy in a marriage and they just remained in the marriage. But anyway, it seems so shocking. But this guy, he's a renowned psychologist. So I was very surprised at those findings. But I think what it's saying is you can't keep things bottled up. You do need to express them. You do need to take care of yourself. Don't lose yourself. Try to do stuff that makes you happy. I remember people giving me this advice and I wasn't taking it. But, even get outside, go for a walk, put on lipstick, do your hair, dress up. Number 4, when you feel you're at your lowest, do something for someone. This advice I did take on occasion, and it did make me feel better. And usually, like, it might be for your kids, just, you're feeling so horrible, just go do something nice for your kids that's just unexpected. Or for a neighbor, try to shake your funk by giving instead of concentrating on how awful everything is. And I'm going to play this clip for you right now. And it's with Mike Rogan, who I'm sure most of you know. And it's about the number 1 symptom of depression. And I know he was really taken with this person, giving him this enlightening fact. And I think you might be too.
Wow. I never really considered that until your book. Until I heard the title of your book and I read the synopsis of it. I never really considered it. I never considered that thinking about your problems all the time and talking about your problems all the time literally make the problems grow.
That's right. I mean, it's the number 1 symptom of depression is what they call rumination, this pathological obsessing over your pain.
Yeah.
That's why stuff like exercise, that's one of the reasons, aside from chemical reasons, one of the reasons that doing anything, that running errands is good for your mental health, getting out of your house and accomplishing anything is good for you. But sitting around talking and thinking about your problems, that's a bad habit. And the best cognitive behavioral therapists and others, the dialectical behavioral therapists, the ones who do really well with depression, the first thing they do is try to break that bad pattern. But a lot of therapists just indulge it.
So basically, what that clip is saying is when you ruminate on all the bad stuff, it's not productive. And I know I was the worst at this. I would worry. I would play it over my head. People were trying to give me solutions or make me think a different way. And I was like, no, I was always coming back to it, but this and that and this and that. And like I said before, the more you're negative, the more negative things are going to happen to you. You'll just bring it right back to you. It's very much it's the opposite of positivity. It's never going to lead to anything positive. Number 5, and I did touch on this, do not date before you're ready. You are going to attract who you are or where you're at that point, and you don't want to attract back to you the worst version of yourself. So wait, you have to heal. Waiting is way better, trust me, and learn to like yourself in your own company. I mean, get a dog. Dogs are great. And I did have a dog. He was a wonderful dog. Number 6, and this is a really important one. Take care of your financial health.
Did you do that?
I did not. Again, I'm saying things that I didn't do, but I should have. So no one ever gets rich after a divorce. Everyone has less than they started out with because the funds are divided. It's basic math. So you cannot live beyond your means. You can't even live the same way you lived before. You can't stretch what shouldn't be stretched. So, if you can maybe just barely afford that house this is different because it was 12 years ago when I got divorced, but maybe you can afford now $1 million house. Well, you know what? Buy a $700,000 house because when you're stretched like that, everything is more, it's just harder. Everything's harder. If you don't have a financial advisor or if you don't have an accountant, go to the bank, ask for help because money doesn't solve your problems. But I'll tell you, when money is an issue, it makes life more complicated. And this brings me to number 7, last but not least. I already said kids was number 1. But this one is also critical. Positivity is the key. Like I said, I was so negative after both of my divorces, especially the second one, this negativity, it followed me around, and it just grew exponentially with the floods, the problem with kids. And there's this other video I'm going to play here. It's about 45 seconds long. And it's about understanding the difference between contributing factors and determining factors. And very much when you go through a divorce, there are these contributing factors that you can't control, but what you can control is your reaction.
You want to live a miserable life? Go through life believing that contributing factors are determining factors. You will be miserable your whole life because you can't control contributing factors, but you can control determining factors. Here's how you can tell the difference between a contributing factor and a determining factor. All contributing factors are outside of you. All determining factors are inside of you. What does that even mean, Myron? That means if somebody runs into the back of my car, that's a contributing factor. It contributed to the experience of my day. If I spend the rest of my day moping because somebody ran into the back of my car, then I chose to take a contributing factor and turn it into a determining factor because now I've internalized it.
So basically, control your reactions and be as positive as possible. You need to understand that you will get through this, and you will be fabulous again. I have to admit, I was super lucky. I had great friends, as I already mentioned. I had wonderful kids. They put up with me. I had a very supportive mom who helped me so much when my kids were little, and thank God for all of this support. I was lucky because I had a job and I had skills and I was able to make a living. I know in comparison to so many, I had a lot more. And some people have more, some people have less, but I think the advice that I've provided here, it still applies. And I do want to mention too, and people overlook this, there's a good part to divorce. And the good part of divorce is that you are no longer with that person that either, well, you were dramatically ill-suited for, or that didn't want or appreciate you. So you weren't meant to be together. And now you have the opportunity to live a more fulfilled life, on your own or with someone else that you are well suited with. You're free of those shackles and you're able to create a wonderful life for yourself. We all should be doing that for ourselves, living our best life, because by living your best life, you're showing your kids how to live their best life. And as George Herbert says, the best revenge is living well. I think he actually says living well is the best revenge, but I like it the other way. So anyway, spend your time focused on how to recover, as per my 7 tips, and also how to unfuck yourself. I like this one. Unfuck yourself. Be who you were before all of that shit happened that dimmed your fucking light. So that is my long story about my 2 divorces, my suggestions to you on how best to get through a divorce and actually come out better on the other side. So until next time, be real and be the best version of yourself and be fabulous.